So potential complications associated with parenteral nutrition. Till now we were discussing about the individual components, which included proteins, lipids, carbohydrates, minerals, calcium, potassium, sodium, copper, manganese, zinc, selenium, vitamin A, etc. So now we'll come to the potential complications. So complications, of course, cholestasis is very, very important, and it may be seen and is more often transient than progressive. Well, so risk factors include duration of parenteral nutrition. So prolonged parenteral nutrition, that is more than 2 to 4 weeks, will actually lead to cholestasis. Also, smaller preterm children less than 1 kg may have more incidence of cholestasis. Recommended prevention is to avoid fasting. Even minimal enteral feeding, may actually help in stimulating the bile secretion and will actually decrease the incidence of cholestasis associated with parenteral nutrition. So minimal enteral feeding is very, very important as and when possible. Another important complication is metabolic bone disease. So despite all the efforts, children who are on prolonged TPN are actually at risk of metabolic bone disease. Prolonged TPN means typically more than 2 to 4 weeks. It can be reduced by earlier enteral feedings and giving optimum calcium and phosphorus concentrations. The ideal ratio is 1.7:1 by weight. Other complications will include metabolic abnormalities, azotemia, hyperammonemia, hyperchloremic metabolic acidosis. These have become uncommon since introduction of current crystalline amino acid solutions. These complications may occur, however, if we exceed the total intake of protein by 4 gram per kg per day. So remember, 3.5 to 4 gram per kg per day is the target protein concentration or the protein treatment that we give as a part of TPN. If it crosses 4 gram per kg per day, we may land up with azotemia, hyperammonemia and hyperchloremic metabolic acidosis. Next important complication is hyperlipidemia or hypertriglyceridemia. Well, the incidence tends to be inverse related to gestational age and postnatal age and birth weight. Short-term decrease in lipid infusion rate usually is sufficient to normalize the serum lipid levels. AAP suggests serum triglyceride concentration to be maintained below 200 milligrams per deciliter as far as TPN is concerned. Okay. Indirect jaundice or indirect hyperbilirubinemia, it may be common. As the free fatty acids can displace bilirubin from the albumin binding sites, the use of lipid emulsions during the periods of severe jaundice has been questioned. Use lipid infusions at rates up to 3 gram per kg per day. Use of this much fat is unlikely to displace bilirubin. Higher rates, yes, they may actually displace bilirubin. However, during periods of extreme hyperbilirubinemia, for example, nearing exchange zone, rates less than 3 gram per kg per day of lipid infusions are typically provided. So in case there is very high level of jaundice, indirect hyperbilirubinemia approaching the exchange zone, we may actually have to start decreasing the lipid infusion to typically below 3 gram per kg per day. Coming to the next heading, next potential complication is sepsis. It is associated with decreased lipoprotein lipase activity and impaired triglyceride clearance also. So during a sepsis episode, it may be necessary to temporarily reduce or limit the lipid infusion to avoid hypertriglyceridemia. Due to concerns about toxic products of lipid peroxidation, protecting lipid emulsions from both ambient light as well as phototherapy light is very, very important.